So in the last video we have seen how to use various arithmetic operators with the numerical type of data. So in this video we'll see how to use various relational operators with the scalar data and how to use them with the sequential data. So Python provides various relational operators to compare the relationship between two different variables or two different constants or even two different variables or the expressions. So Python provides all these operators like equality, inequality, greater than or equal to, less than and less than or equal to symbols. So to compare two different expressions or two different variables or values. So now let's see in detail how to use them in Python. So you need to remember one thing, relational operators can be used with the scalar data, that is on the numerical data, and also with the sequential data. So in this video we'll see how to use various relational operators with the scalar data. In the next video we'll see how these relational operators can be used with the sequential data. So now let's try to understand how to use these relational operators with the integer data. So let's consider two integer literals, so 10 and 20. So when you are using greater than symbol, you are checking whether the first operand is greater than the second operand or not. So if so, then it returns a true value. So greater than is to check so whether the operand 1 is greater than the operand 2 or not. So here 10 is not greater than 20, that's why it is returning a false. Similarly, you can use the less than operator to check whether the first operand is less than the second operand or not. Here in this case 10 is less than 20, it's true, so it is returning a true value. You can even use equality with the greater than and less than. So let's see, when you are using 10 greater than 10, it's a false because 10 is not greater than 10. But when you are using 10 greater than or equal to 10, then it returns true because of course 10 is not greater than 10, but 10 is equal to 10. So either the first operand is greater than the second operand or either the first operand is equal to the second operand. In either of these cases, greater than or equal to symbol will return a true value. So 20 is greater than or equal to 10. Of course, 20 is clearly greater than 10. That's how anyhow it is returning a true. So similarly, you can use less than or equal to also. When I check 10 less than 10, it is false. But when I check 10 less than or equal to 10, it returns true. The reason is of course 10 equal to 10. In this case, either it is less than or it is equal to. So that's how you can use the relational operators greater than, less than, greater than or equal to and less than or equal to compare two different literal values. You can compare two values to check whether they are equal or not. You can use the equality operator. So in Python, so double equal to symbol can be used as a comparison operator to check whether two values are equal or not. So I am going to check 10 equal to 10. So of course it's true, so it is returning a true value. Similarly, I am going to check whether 10 and 20 are equal. Of course they are not equal, so it is returning a false value. So in addition to the equality checking, you can even check the inequality check by using this exclamatory symbol with the equality symbol together. This symbol is used for inequality checking. So whether this whether two operands are not equal or not, it will check. When the operands are not equal, then it returns a true. So here in this case 10 and 20 are not equal, so it returns a true value. Because they are not equal, it's returning a true. So now let's check 10 and 10. So here in this case 10 and 10 they are equal, so the inequality operator is returning a false value. So here this equality operator returns true when these two operands are equal, and it returns false when the two operands are unequal. But whereas the inequality operator will return a true value when the two operands are not equal. In the other case it returns a false value. So that's how you can use various relational operators or the comparison operators with the literals. Here I have used various integer literals. These relational operators can also be used with the floating point values. So before proceeding to floating point values, so let's consider two variables, the integer variables, and let's see how they can be used with the integer variables. So these relational operators can be used with the variables also. So I am going to check whether A and B are holding the same values or not. Here if you observe, A is holding the value 10 and B is having the value 30. So when you check whether they are equal or not, because 10 and 30 are not equal, so it's returning a false value. So you can even use the inequality operator. So A not equal to B, of course they are not equal, so the inequality operator is returning a true value. So let's create one more variable, so C, which is having the value 20. So now I'm going to check whether A is greater than B or not. So you can see A value is 10 and B value is 30. So 10 is greater than 30, it's false, so it's returning a false value. So maybe you can check B is less than C. So B is less than C, again it's false. So B is having 30 and C is 20. 30 is less than 20 is false, so it's returning a false value. Maybe I'll check B equal to B itself. So of course they are having the same value, B and B are the same, so it's returning a true value. So that's how you can use these relational operators with the variables also. It need not to be with a single variable. You can form the expression also, maybe something like A plus B is greater than C or not. So here if you observe, A is 10, B is 30 and C is 20. So I am checking whether A plus B is greater than C or not. 10 plus 30, 40, 40 is greater than C, which is having a value 20. So because it's true, it's returning a true value. So that's how you can make the complex expressions and you can use the relational operators to compare the relation between two or more expressions. Here I am forming another complex expression, which is A plus B plus C is less than A into B into C. Here the right hand side expression evaluates to a bigger value than this value, so it returns a true value. So that's how you can use these relational operators either with the literal values or with the variables or even with the expressions. So now let's see how we can use them with the floating point values. So far we have seen how we can use relational operators with the integer type of variables or the integer literals or the integer expressions. Now let's see how we can make use of them with the floating point values. So 3.4 is greater than 4.5, it's false, so it is returning a false value. So now let's check 3.9 is less than 4.5. Of course it's true, so it returns a true value. So I'm going to check 3.1 equal to 3.1. So of course it's a true value. So now I'm going to check whether 5.6 is less than or equal to, so 5.6 itself. Of course it's a true value. So that's how you can use these relational operators with the floating point values also. So not equal to 5.6, of course it's a true value. When you use the equality operator with a float type of data, so the results might surprise you sometimes. So you need to be little careful. Consider this example, x equal to 0.1 plus 0.2. So then I'm going to use this x in a comparison operation with the equality operator. So x equal to 0.3 I'm checking. So here based on the previous assignment, I expect that x gets a value of 0.3, and when I do this comparison x equal to 0.3, I expect the result of the relational operator to be true, but it is not the case. It returns a false value. The reason is the value that is stored in x is not exactly 0.3. So the value stored in x is closest to value to 0.3. That's how when you are applying this comparison operation with x, then the resultant value is the false. So to avoid these kind of statements, so maybe you can use something like math dot. First you need to import the package math, and then after importing the package math, so in this package you have a method isClose. So instead of using the comparison equality operator, you can use isClose method and pass these two arguments whichever you want to compare, so x and 0.3. So in this case you will get a true value. So that's how you can use the math.isClose method to check whether two floating point numbers are equal or not. So maybe I'll show you another example where x is assigned with the summation of 0.1 plus 0.1 plus 0.1. So in this case again, so you can see x equal to 0.3. So it returns a false value because x is storing this value which is close to 0.3, not exactly 0.3. So this kind of inaccuracy in precision will result in surprising results while using the floating point type data with the equality or the inequality operators. So you need to be little careful while using the equality operator with the floating point type data. So now we understand that these relational operators can be used with the integers or can be used with the float type of values also. So can they be used with the complex numbers? Let's check whether it is feasible to use the relational operators with the complex numbers or not. So I am creating C1 and C2 as two complex numbers, and let's try to use the relational operator greater than on C1 and C2. It's not valid. It's not valid to use the greater than, less than symbols with the complex numbers, whereas you can use to check the equality or inequality of the complex numbers. See, you can use the equality operator or the inequality operator, but it's not valid to use the greater than or the less than operators with the complex numbers. So far we have seen how you can use the relational operators with the numerical data like integers, floating point type of data, and the complex numbers. So we understand that it's not valid to use greater than or less than operators with the complex numbers. So in case of the relational operators, we need to understand one thing. So whatever the type of data you are comparing and whatever the relational operator you are using, always the operator is returning a Boolean value. Either it is a true value or a false value. So thank you for watching this video.